In the vast tapestry of existence, where the threads of consciousness weave an intricate pattern beyond the grasp of ordinary perception, the journey of spiritual growth emerges like a beacon of luminous enigma. It calls to those who seek to dive beneath the surface of their waking reality, beckoning them through corridors not of stone or steel, but of transcendent insight and shifted awareness. Yet within this sacred quest, many find themselves ensnared by shadows disguised as truths, myths that obscure rather than illuminate, mirages that limit the unfolding of their full potential. To awaken fully, one must first recognize these veils, the subtle distortions that cling to spiritual growth like ivy on an ancient temple wall. Only then can the pathway open wider, revealing the sublime architecture of the self and the cosmos intertwining. Imagine spiritual growth as a cosmic river, fluid, ever-moving, and mysteriously deep. This river flows through deserts of doubt, forests of illusion, and caverns echoing with the silent songs of the soul. It invites each traveler to surrender to its current, to let go of the familiar shores and venture into its boundless depths. Yet, many who embark on this journey carry within them invisible weights, false beliefs about what it means to ascend, to evolve, to transcend. These are not mere obstacles but foundational misconceptions, like maps drawn with errors that lead wanderers into labyrinths of frustration rather than the expansive plains of awakening. The myths that we hold close often masquerade as wisdom, their siren calls tempting seekers to an incomplete or distorted understanding of their spiritual path. At the heart of this exploration lies a paradox. The very endeavor to grow spiritually can become the greatest barrier to growth. This paradox is woven into the timeless dance between desire and surrender, effort and release, knowing and unknowing. To grow is to expand consciousness, to peel back layers of conditioning and egoic limitation. Yet when certain myths take root beneath awareness, they constrict rather than liberate. One might be tempted to believe that spiritual growth is a linear ascent, a staircase to be climbed rung by rung, with clear milestones and fixed destinations. Or that it requires perfection, a state of immunity from human frailty and shadow. Such illusions craft an internal pressure cooker, where the genuine unfolding of the soul's essence is stifled beneath the weight of expectation and self-judgment. In the cosmic theater where spirit and matter perform their eternal ballet, these myths act as hidden scripts written in forgotten languages. They are encoded within cultural narratives, spiritual dogmas, and even within the inner dialogue of the awakened self, whispered doubts phrased as certainties. To unravel these strands is to begin the process of unlearning, a sacred art often more daunting than acquiring new knowledge. It is an invitation to dwell in the mystery of not knowing, to embrace the shadows as companions rather than foes, and to see that growth is not a conquest but a resonance, a harmonization with the subtle frequencies of being. Here, in this liminal space between certainty and doubt, the true alchemy of transformation takes shape. The practical significance of dispelling these myths is profound, touching the very core of how one navigates life's challenges and opportunities. Spiritual growth, when freed from limitation, becomes a dynamic force that infuses every moment with meaning and possibility. It is no longer a distant ideal or a secret club of enlightened few, but a tangible, living reality available to all who dare to shed the layers of misconception. In this awakening emerges the recognition that spiritual evolution is not a destination, but an ongoing unfolding, an eternal becoming that honors the fullness of human experience, light and shadow intertwined like the dual strands of DNA spiraling through the cosmic code. As we prepare to journey through the 6 myths that so often hold seekers captive, it is essential to hold space for the paradox that the unfolding truth is itself beyond all conceptual boundaries. These myths, while limiting, are also reflections of the deep yearning within, the hunger for wholeness, for transcendence, for freedom from suffering. To confront and transcend them is to engage with the very fabric of one's being, to encounter the hidden architecture of the soul's ascent. In peeling back their layers, you are invited into a cosmic dialogue, a conversation between your inner light and the mysterious vastness from which it shines. The awakening that lies beyond these myths is not a solitary achievement, but a return to a universal pulse, a reconnection with the primordial wisdom flowing beneath the surface of existence. It is the recognition that spiritual growth is as much about embracing the human condition, with its doubts, fears, imperfections, and joys, as it is about rising above it. The path unfurls not in the realm of extraordinary feats or esoteric knowledge alone, but within the ordinary moments of presence and compassion, within the quiet surrender to what is. In this embrace, the illusions begin to dissolve like morning mist kissed by the dawn's first light, revealing the boundless horizon where potential is no longer confined, but radiantly infinite. Thus, as we embark on this exploration of the 6 myths that limit your spiritual potential, let us do so with a spirit of reverence and curiosity, aware that these concepts are not merely mental constructs, but lived realities that shape the very texture of your unfolding experience. Let the language of metaphor and the echo of cosmic mystery guide us beyond the veil of surface appearances, into the deeper realms where truth resonates not as a rigid doctrine, but as a luminous invitation. Here, in this sacred space of inquiry, the seeds of transformation are sown, ready to bloom into a new paradigm of spiritual growth, one without boundaries, without shackles, and without limits to the vastness of your becoming. In the unfolding tapestry of spiritual growth, the threads we grasp often shimmer with the allure of certainty, yet beneath their radiant surface lie deeper currents, weaving a complex interplay of truth and illusion. The myths that seek to define and confine our evolution are not mere errors of logic or whimsy. They are reflections of a primordial impulse within the human psyche, the yearning to make sense of vast, uncharted territories of consciousness through simplified narratives. These stories, while comforting in their form and familiar in their cadence, shape the very contours of our growth. They form invisible walls, subtle traps of belief that throttle the infinite potential within us and cast shadows upon the path of awakening. One of the foundational illusions spiraling through spiritual discourse is the myth of linear progress. Like the ancient alchemists who chased a singular, perfect goal, the seeker is often led to imagine the spiritual journey as a steady ascent, a ladder with clearly marked rungs towards enlightenment. Yet the cosmos itself is not a straight line but a dance of spirals, an eternal movement of returning and transcending, falling and rising anew. The idea that spiritual growth is a one-way trajectory of consistent improvement masks the cyclical nature of consciousness and the essential necessity of descent as well as ascent. Much in the manner of the phoenix, true growth requires moments of burning, falling into ashes of doubt or despair, before the wings can unfurl once again, broader and more radiant. This myth glosses over the sacred ebb and flow, transforming our pilgrimage into an exhausting race, blinding us to the grace embedded in the pauses and regressions that are the fertile soil of transformation. Moreover, there is a seductive myth that spiritual growth demands an escape from the human condition, a transcending beyond all emotions, desires, and imperfections, as if the divine spark within demands a cold, sterile perfection to shine. This narrative sketches the spiritual seeker as a being who must sever ties with the messy, turbulent world of feelings and form, becoming a spectral observer untouched by the tides of life's joys and sorrows. Yet, the universe sings in the language of paradox and integration. The deep truths held within ancient wisdom traditions whisper that it is through embracing the totality of our humanity, the shadows as much as the light, that spiritual awakening unfolds. The emotional storms are not obstacles to be avoided but alchemical flames forging the steel of authentic selfhood. To reject this fullness is to deny the sacred text written on the body and heart, to sever the roots of the tree in the soil of lived experience, and thereby stunt its growth toward the sunlit sky. Another subtle but pervasive myth enshrines the notion that spiritual awakening equates to the acquisition of secret knowledge or esoteric power, hidden codes locked behind cryptic symbols and guarded by ancient masters. In this narrative, the seeker becomes a treasure hunter, chasing fragments of forgotten lore, hoping to harness mysterious energies or attain supernatural abilities. The deeper truth beneath this facade is the recognition that truth is not a commodity but a living current flowing through all things, accessible not through possession but through surrender. The universe does not confine wisdom to cryptic tomes or elite circles, but offers it in the simple breath, the open heart, the moment fully lived with awareness. The fixation on hidden knowledge often erects barriers of exclusivity and pride, reinforcing separateness, rather than dissolving it into the unity that spiritual growth ultimately beckons us toward. There is also the myth of instant transformation, the belief that spiritual breakthroughs occur as sudden, dramatic flashes of insight that instantly transmute the seeker into a higher state of being. These moments of illumination do occur, like the burst of a supernova scattering stardust across the sky, but to imagine that they stand alone risks misunderstanding the slow alchemy of sustained inner work. True spiritual growth is a weaving of countless subtle experiences, where each thread, each moment of kindness, each act of self-reflection, each encounter with suffering, is interlaced to form a resilient fabric of awakening. The cosmos itself reminds us of this in the cycles of seasons, the gradual bloom of flowers, the patient accumulation of geological strata. To expect sudden transcendence without the quiet unfolding is to mistake fireworks for the sustained warmth of the eternal flame. Intertwined with these myths is the illusion that spiritual growth can be pursued as a solitary endeavor, a solitary star shining fiercely in the dark void. While the inner journey is deeply personal, it is not isolated from the web of interconnectedness that defines existence. The tendrils of our becoming reach through relationships, community, and shared experience, drawing nourishment from others, reflections, and the collective consciousness. Spiritual awakening is more akin to a constellation than a lone beacon. Its brilliance depends not only on individual light, but on the harmonious interplay with other stars. The myth of solitary ascent may glamorize self-sufficiency, yet it often leads to isolation, disconnection, and the false belief that one must carry the weight of cosmic transformation alone. Lastly, the myth that spiritual growth suppresses or rejects the material world and physical existence casts the earthly realm as a discordant shadow, a prison from which the soul must escape. This dualistic vision perpetuates a rift between spirit and matter, as if the sacred is confined solely to realms beyond the tangible. Yet the alchemy of awakening reveals that the sacred is immanent, woven into the very fabric of the physical. The body, the earth, the senses are not hindrances but gateways to expanded awareness. The dance of electrons spinning in atoms, the rhythms of the ocean tides, the symphony of the cosmos, all are expressions of the divine manifest. To deny the material is to close the door on an essential dimension of wholeness, to overlook the profound mystery encoded in the ordinary. These myths form a constellation of veils obscuring the multifaceted, flowing nature of spiritual growth. They represent universal patterns born from our collective attempts to impose order on the ineffable, to tether the boundless to the familiar shore of comprehension. Behind them lies the deeper truth that spiritual growth is not a fixed destination or a prescribed path, but a living process of unfolding, an endless weaving of shadow and light, surrender and striving, knowledge and mystery. To transcend these myths is to step into a realm where the rigid walls of dogma dissolve, where the kaleidoscope of experience dances freely, and where your potential is no longer hemmed in by the stories we tell, but liberated by the vast silence at the heart of existence. In the vast theater of the cosmos, beneath the ceaseless shimmer of stars that seem to murmur secrets older than time itself, there unfolds a tapestry of allegories, each thread a whisper of deeper truths, veiled in metaphor and mirth, waiting for those who dare to listen with the heart's attuned ear. To navigate the labyrinth of spiritual growth, to unravel the bindings of myths that limit our potential, we must first surrender to the power of story. For it is in the weave of narrative that wisdom moves beyond mere concepts and into the living soil of understanding. Imagine, then, the tale of the celestial weaver, an ancient being who spins the loom of existence from threads of light and shadow. The weaver's loom is eternal, its threads infinite, but there is a curious pattern that surfaces repeatedly. A pattern of knots, entangled and dense, arises whenever seekers attempt to rush the unfolding, to pull at a single thread before it is ready to emerge from the cosmic fabric. These knots symbolize the first myth, the illusion of spiritual growth as a linear ascent, a steady climb to an ever-elusive summit. The weaver, in her endless patience, reminds us that each thread must be felt, touched, and allowed its own dance through time. To tug harshly leads only to breakage and frustration. The myth of linear progression reduces the spiraling dance of becoming to a stairwell of steps, when in truth growth curls like smoke, unpredictable yet purposeful, folding back upon itself before reaching toward the infinite sky. In a distant valley carved by winds older than memory, there once lived a blind seer known as Amara. She dwelled beneath a cavernous arch where storms gathered, telling tales to the thunder and answering in whispers to the lightning. Many believed that spiritual awakening was a solitary pilgrimage, a path walked alone through shadowed woods and silent deserts. Yet Amara's story unfolds differently. Though sightless by birth, her awakening was woven through the hands and voices of the village, the pulse of community, and the intertwining roots of relationship. One night, as the storm's breath roared, she grasped the truth encoded in the tempest's fury. That isolation is a myth born from fear, a veil that fragments the soul's light. True growth, like the storm, is communal, a symphony performed by many voices echoing in sacred harmony. The myth of the lone spiritual warrior, wielding truth as a solitary sword, blinds seekers to the nourishing power of kinship and shared illumination. Far beyond the valley, on a mountaintop where earth meets sky in a silent vow, stood the Temple of Mirrors. Here, pilgrims would gaze into reflective pools, hoping to catch a glimpse of the divine self hidden beneath layers of ego and illusion. Yet the reflections whispered not only beauty and clarity, but also the shadows cast by desire and judgment. Many sought purity as an untarnished, pristine white light, believing that spiritual growth meant shedding all darkness completely. But the temple guardians told a different story, a parable of the night-blooming lotus, whose roots thrive in the mud yet open their petals to the moon's gentle blessing. The myth of perfection, the demand for unblemished holiness, obscures the sacred dialogue between shadow and light that animates growth. In this interplay, the darkness is not an enemy to be banished, but a vital counterpart, an undercurrent of alchemical fire fueling transformation. Travel now into the silent forest where the ancient oak, known as the heartwood, stands sentinel amid the mossy stones. This tree does not grow by striving or by competing with the winds, but yields gracefully, bending in the storm's embrace. Here lies a quiet parable about the myth of resistance, that greater effort, relentless control, or sheer willpower alone can force spiritual awakening. The heartwood story unfolds like the slow unfurling of a fern frond, a testament to surrender, patience, and trust in the unseen currents beneath the surface. To resist is to tighten the grip on the self, fracturing the fragile harmony between human striving and cosmic timing. Growth, the heartwood teaches, is a dance with the invisible winds, a yielding that generates strength far beyond brute force. Beneath a sky bruised with twilight, there drifts a river, known among the ancients as the stream of becoming. This river carries waters from countless springs, each imbued with the essences of diverse teachings, mysticism, philosophy, science, and myth. Many travelers believe that spiritual growth demands unwavering adherence to a singular doctrine or path, building walls to protect the sanctity of their chosen teachings. Yet the stream flows continuously, unconfined by borders, blending waters in fluid convergence. To attempt to dam, it is to invite stagnation and decay. The river's tale shimmers with the wisdom that spiritual awakening is not a rigid dogma, but a fluid, evolving journey where multiple voices and perspectives harmonize. The myth of singular truth narrows the river's course into a trickle, whereas the entire stream surges toward the boundless ocean of being. Lastly, in the shadow of distant stars, there is a legend of the cosmic gardener, whose hands nurture seeds of awakening scattered across the fertile fields of consciousness. The gardener knows that some seeds germinate swiftly, bursting into radiant bloom, while others sleep beneath the soil for seasons untold. There is no timetable, but only profound faith in the invisible forces that shape growth. Yet humanity often falls prey to the myth of immediate enlightenment, the craving for swift transformation, as if spiritual awakening were a transaction with a clock. This impatience forgets that the universe's timing is a vast, intricate rhythm, resonant with seasons, cycles, and cosmic heartbeats. The gardener's quiet hope whispers to those who listen. To desire rapid illumination is to disregard the sacred pacing of growth, which unfolds like the gradual blossoming of a star hidden behind a veil of night. Each allegory is a portal, a language of symbols that vibrate beyond the confines of rational thought. Through the celestial weaver, Amara the seer, the temple of mirrors, the heartwood oak, the stream of becoming, and the cosmic gardener, we encounter the living paradox of spiritual growth. It is neither a straight line nor a lonely quest. It embraces shadow and light, yields to invisible currents, drinks from many streams, and blooms in the rhythm of cosmic time. These stories invite us to release the limiting myths that constrict our potential, and to instead become fluent in the language of becoming, where every step is an unfolding mystery, every moment a sacred breath in the eternal dance of existence. To walk the symbolic pathways we have traced thus far is to awaken not only to the hidden architecture of spirit, but also to the tangible layers where this awakening must find its foothold, in the seemingly mundane texture of daily existence. The celestial tapestry, woven in realms of metaphor, begins to pulse with a new vitality when it shifts from the ether of contemplation into the fertile soil of lived experience. It is here, amidst the clatter of ordinary moments and the quiet breath between thoughts, that the grand truths dissolve their veils and reveal practical wisdom, subtle yet profound, for those daring enough to embody the unfolding mysteries. Imagine, then, the alchemy of integrating the understanding that spiritual growth is not a race toward a luminous summit, but a patient, rhythmic dance with time itself. When the clock's tyranny is relinquished, life opens as a luminous scroll, inviting a gentler pace, a deeper trust. The frantic grasping for instant transformation unravels, and with it falls the burden of disappointment that too often shadows the seeker's path. In everyday life, this means embracing setbacks not as failures but as the soil's rich loam, nurturing unseen roots that deepen the soul's anchorage. The small irritations and hardships become initiations rather than obstacles, each challenge a whispered initiation into the sacred unfolding of being. This shift in perspective radiates into the very way we cultivate our inner landscape. The myth of spiritual growth as a linear ascension is transformed into an acceptance of the spiral's wisdom, a cyclical weaving that returns us again and again to the same lessons, each time with a wider horizon. In practical terms, this reframing invites patience with one's own imperfections, granting permission to falter and rise, to oscillate between light and shadow without self-condemnation. The habitual voice of self-judgment softens into a compassionate companion, and the inner dialogue becomes a sanctuary rather than a battleground. With this, the sacred alchemy of self-forgiveness infuses the mundane moments, reshaping how we meet ourselves and others with gentleness amid the inevitable turbulence. The liberation from the myth of spiritual elitism also unclasps the gates that separate us from the communal aspect of growth. The illusion that awakening is a solitary quest, a path walked in isolation behind veiled doors, dissolves when seen through the prism of interconnectedness that defines the cosmic dance. In the practical world, this recognition fosters real, embodied empathy and connection. It invites the seeking heart to enter circles of shared vulnerability, where the worn edges of personal stories are met with understanding rather than judgment. Such communion becomes a potent catalyst, reminding us that spiritual growth is less about solitary conquest and more about weaving our threads into the vast, luminous web of collective evolution. Beneath this lies a subtle but powerful reclamation of groundedness. The myth that spiritual growth necessitates a radical dissociation from the physical world, renouncing desires, distancing from materiality, or rejecting bodily wisdom, finds itself challenged by the aliveness of integrated consciousness. True awakening does not shun the earth but celebrates it as sacred. Therefore, the practical implication is a more harmonious relationship with one's own body and environment. Taking time to honor the senses, to walk barefoot on sacred ground, to savor the taste of nourishment, or to listen attentively to the heart's rhythm becomes a form of spiritual devotion. This reclamation of embodied presence catalyzes a deeper resonance with life itself, grounding the ethereal currents of awakening in the tangible beauty of the here and now. Another compelling transformation emerges in the way we relate to knowledge and the quest for hidden truths. The myth that spiritual growth is synonymous with amassing esoteric information or mystical experiences is transmuted as we recognize that wisdom is less about accumulation and more about alchemical assimilation, digesting insights until they become a living part of our being. This has profound practical ramifications in a world awash with information, where the mind often risks becoming a repository of disconnected fragments rather than a sanctuary of coherent understanding. The answer lies in cultivating stillness and discernment, allowing new knowledge to permeate gradually, like rain soaking into parched earth, fostering a deepening rather than a scattering of awareness. This mindful integration encourages a balanced approach to study and contemplation, where each insight finds its proper place in the unfolding mosaic of self-realization. Perhaps the most transformative of all, the release from the myth that spiritual growth is a destination to be reached or a state to be permanently attained, dissolves the illusion of finality. In practice, this teaches us to embrace the fluidity of existence, to welcome change and mystery without clinging to fixed identities or expectations. Life's impermanence becomes a sacred dance partner rather than a source of fear or resistance. We learn to flow with shifting realities, adapting with grace and curiosity, recognizing that every ending bears the seed of a new beginning. In this ever-evolving rhythm, spiritual growth becomes a lifelong invitation to explore the unfathomable depths of being, to ride the waves of transformation with open arms and an open heart. As these insights percolate into the fabric of daily life, the seeker's journey softens into a gentle unfolding, where each breath becomes a prayer, each encounter a portal of awakening, and each moment a reflection of the infinite cosmos mirrored within. The myths that once cast shadows upon potential now serve as fading echoes of a past limited vision, replaced by the radiant clarity that true spiritual growth is not a treasure hidden somewhere beyond reach, but the luminous presence we cultivate through humility, patience, empathy, embodiment, discernment, and surrender. This alchemical shift from myth to lived truth is where the cosmic narrative intersects with earthly reality, and it is here, in this convergence, that genuine transformation quietly but irrevocably takes root. In the vast, ever-shifting mosaic of existence, where countless threads of perception weave the tapestry of our experience, spiritual growth stands not as a fixed monument but as an infinite horizon, ever receding, ever inviting. As we close this exploration of the myths which have long veiled the true nature of our unfolding, we are invited to step beyond the shadows and into the liminal space of possibility, where the known and unknown meet in a timeless embrace. The journey we have traversed together, through the landscape of illusions and the revelation of deeper truths, converges now into a singular realization. The path of spiritual awakening is not a race to a summit, nor a quest for rarefied knowledge. It is a sacred pilgrimage into the boundless terrain of being itself. These myths, as ancient as the stars and as subtle as the whisper of the wind through forgotten canyons, have served as both guardians and gatekeepers, filtering our potential, shaping our expectations, and at times, confining our visions within narrow frames. Yet, to dismantle these illusions is not to abandon reverence or discipline, but to reclaim the fluid, radiant essence of growth as a living, breathing dance with existence. It is to awaken to the truth that spiritual evolution is a dynamic interplay between surrender and striving, chaos and order, light and shadow, within the cosmic ocean that courses through every atom of our being. In this continuing dance, the seeker becomes the sought. The question dissolves into the very fabric of the answer, and the boundaries that once defined self and other blur into a luminous oneness. Growth is no longer a distant peak, but the ground beneath our feet, rich with fertile soil for transformation, teeming with unseen roots and the quiet stirrings of renewal. To embrace this perspective is to recognize that every moment holds the potential for awakening, that the sacred is threaded through the mundane, and that the limitations imposed by old beliefs are but mirages shimmering on the horizon of consciousness. As we breathe in this realization, it becomes clear that transformation is not a series of linear steps or a checklist of spiritual achievements, but an alchemical process of becoming, a sacred surrender to the unfolding mystery that invites us to let go of control and to trust the invisible currents guiding our passage. This trust is the seed of true freedom, the quiet flame that burns steadily amidst the storms of doubt and distraction, illuminating the way when the terrain grows uncertain. It teaches us that the heart of spiritual growth lies in opening deeply to the present moment, in listening to the subtle language of our inner landscape, and in allowing the full spectrum of our humanity, our joys, fears, failings, and triumphs, to be honored and held. Reflecting upon the 6 myths that once held sway, we see how they were threads woven from the human desire for certainty, control, and quick results, an understandable impulse in a world hungry for meaning and clarity. Yet these myths also obscure the profound truth that spiritual awakening demands patience, curiosity, and a willingness to dwell in paradox. It calls us to cultivate compassion, not only towards others but towards the self, recognizing that the jagged edges of imperfection are the very facets through which light enters. In this way, growth is less a conquest and more an art, a tender unfolding like petals opening to dawn, revealing hidden fragrances and colors only visible in the gentle unfolding of time. When these insights integrate into the fabric of daily life, our relationships transform from battlegrounds of desire and judgment into sacred arenas of co-creation and healing. Our work, once a mere task, becomes an offering, our struggles, the crucibles of wisdom forged in fire. In navigating the paradoxes of spiritual growth, embracing both the vast mystery and the palpable realities, we awaken to a form of living that is expansive yet grounded, cosmic yet intimate. The ripple effects of this awakening extend beyond the individual, echoing in the subtle fields of connection that bind us to family, community, and the earth itself. In the final reckoning, to transcend these limiting myths is to step into a larger story, one written not in the ink of dogma or doctrine, but in the luminous language of direct experience. This story is both ancient and forever new, a cosmic poem being composed in every breath, every choice, every act of consciousness. It invites us to become not mere spectators of our evolution but active participants, co-creators attuned to the rhythms of universal law, the hidden architectures of existence that weave meaning into chaos and order alike. So, as you stand now at this threshold, poised between the familiar and the infinite unknown, allow a quiet invitation to arise within you, a call to deepen your gaze beyond the surface illusions, to dissolve the boundaries of old myths with the light of your own unfolding awareness. Embrace the paradox, the mystery, the ceaseless flow, and recognize that each step you take in conscious presence is a sacred affirmation of life's eternal dance. Your potential is not limited by the stories you have inherited but boundless as the cosmos itself, when you choose to walk in harmony with the unseen currents that carry you towards ever-unfolding horizons. In this awakening, may you find the courage to release expectation, the humility to surrender control, and the joy to celebrate the sacred journey unfolding through your very being. For spiritual growth is not a destination to be conquered, but the luminous path beneath your feet, alive, infinite, and shimmering with the promise of transformation that lies within and beyond all knowing.